The Democratic Party is clearly in trouble, and this is confirmed now by a series of surveys and studies and polls, and even the mainstream media, which would obviously view this as bad news. They've been cheering and trying to kind of prop up Biden now ever since the guy came into office. But evidently those efforts have failed, or put it differently, even though the media has been cheering for Biden, the American people really aren't buying it. And Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, AOC, has a sort of diagnosis for why this is so. Now, obviously, I agree with her starting point. A starting point, which is the thumbnail of this podcast, is we're in trouble. And we here refers to the Democratic Party. So I think she's right about that. Now, let's look at AOC's diagnosis as to why that is the case. Because I think, ironically, that her policy prescriptions, her solution, may actually be what's causing the problem in the first place. So here's AOC. She says, first of all, and this is in a description in New York Magazine that's giving a kind of favorable analysis of AOC, she says that Biden is under a kind of delusion. And the delusion is that the Democrats can reach out to the moderate center and cut deals. And so Biden, she thinks, because of his past, he's kind of a backroom politician, light up the cigar, sit down, work out a deal, particularly inside of his own party. She thinks that this is what Biden has been trying to do with people like Sinema and especially with Manchin. And according to AOC, that is the old Democratic Party. That politics is now antiquated. AOC says, quote, I think that there's a real nostalgia and belief that that time still exists, or that we can get back to that. So apparently, according to AOC, and again, she may be right about this, there are not a whole lot of moderate Democrats left in the Democratic Party. So the idea that you can bring a guy like Manchin along, she says, was always an illusion that she never sort of fell for, but she thinks Biden did. She thinks that Biden, in his effort to reach out to people like Manchin and meet them halfway, remember Biden took the Build Back Better bill, $3.5 trillion, sort of scaled it back to 1.5, thinking maybe I'll get Manchin that way, but even that was too much for Manchin. So AOC's point is the Democrats need to go the other way, that their problem is not that they are too left-wing, it's that they're not left-wing enough. And so AOC thinks is that because of Biden's kind of waffling and his desire to kind of keep Manchin on the boat, that Biden is demoralizing the progressives, the young people, the blacks and Latinos who are the activist base of the Democratic Party. Now, it's very clear that AOC plays to that base, and it's very clear that she has used that base to build up her own image and her own following, and it's a big following. I mean, just on social media alone, 13 million followers on Twitter, 8.5 million on Instagram. So this woman has become a sensation out of nowhere. And she's also made her own position kind of impregnable in her own districts. If people run against her, they have like $100,000. She has like 8 million. So it's very difficult now. She's become a star and a fundraising star in the Democratic Party. But a clue that AOC's analysis may be off the mark can be seen in the New York mayoral race, where she endorsed the left-winger, this woman named Maya Wiley. And of course, the moderate in the race, or relative moderate, we're talking about Democrats after all, was this guy Eric Adams. But it turns out that not only did Adams win decisively, but working families of color, namely black working class guys and Latino working class guys, voted for Adams. They didn't want defund the police. They didn't want all this left-wing identity politics. So they went in a completely different direction. And what that tells you is that while AOC may be right about the Democratic Party has lurched left. There aren't a whole lot of moderates left. At the same time, AOC seems to be completely wrong about the country. The country is not on board with the progressive agenda. Sure, if you go to people with very blandly worded polls, would you like to have some more bridges? Well, yeah, I think I would. Would you like to have more money for schools? Oh, yeah, I think I would. So in principle, people are like, yeah, I'd like to see more of that. But when you tell people, would you like to pay the price of that? Are you willing to give up this in exchange for that? In other words, when you bring people into the real world by asking asking them to make the kind of trade-offs that are inherently necessary when you make these kinds of decisions, then people go, nah, I'm not so happy about that. I'd rather figure that one out to myself. In the same way that people in their own lives, whenever you ask someone in principle, hey, would you like to have 10 candy bars? Well, yeah, I would. Yeah, but would you like to destroy your health while doing that? No, not exactly. You want to pay all this money to have this thing that you otherwise would have, which will prevent you from buying something else? Well, no, I think given that, I'm not going to do it. So AOC in this sense is crashing into the real world. And because she lives in a certain kind of progressive bubble where she's surrounded by, giddy and giggling activists, she thinks not only that's the Democratic Party, but that's the country. And therefore she comes up with this recipe, which I think far from solving the problems of the Democrats, would only make their political woes worse.